Welcome back to Study Through the Bible YouTube channel where we study the Bible in community, and we do that in 3 simple steps. And so the first step, if you go to your description down below, you will find daily assignments to help you to get into the Word and study it and understand what it is that you are reading. Step 2 are these weekly videos where I share my insights and comments into the section we were reading the week before. And step 3 is where you share your insights, your questions, comments in the comments section down below, and I'll be checking back to see what you all have to say. If all that sounds great to you, hit click that subscribe button, and the like is always a good help as well. Share it with other people in your life who want to study the Bible but don't have the tools to do so successfully. Today we're going to be talking about godly transition, how to make transitions in our life in the most godly way that we can. And we're going to be talking about that as we get into the first of our installment in the series in 1st and 2nd Kings and 2nd Chronicles. And of course, we have all of our playlists going backwards all the way back to the book of Genesis, where we started this process. And so, glad that you're here with us. Let's go ahead and dive right in. 1 Kings 1:13, Go in to King David and say to him, My lord the king, did you not swear to me your servant, surely Solomon your son shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne? Why then has Adonijah become king? Now, in David's case, I feel like he actually did this right. And the first thing that we can do with the godly transitions is to try and make the transition clear as we possibly can. Meaning, as soon as we know that the transition is going to happen, the best way to do it is to start moving and taking one step at a time towards that transition. And if it's a transition in person, then the best way to do that is if you already have that person in mind, to be able to communicate that and transition that as clearly as you possibly can. Now, David was the king, and he was trying to transition as he was coming to the end of his life, and he knew it. He was trying to transition the kingdom over to his son Solomon. Now, this had been made clear by God, and through revelation, this has been made clear through David. And yet, as he is about to die, he gets wind that once again, one of the other sons has made a bidding for king. And a lot of times what I find is that this is exactly what happens when there's a transition, is that everybody kind of goes crazy. Everybody that is at least trying to look at that as an opportunity for selfish ambition. And so if it's a change in personhood. Now, I saw this, it was unfortunate more recently, Chuck Smith, who was one of, when I was growing up, I grew up near Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and many of you are familiar with the Calvary Chapel movement. And, I would often go there, even though it was my home church, I would often go there to hear some really great teachers teach the Word of God verse by verse, expositionally. And, a lot of people know what he did, with the hippies and reaching out when nobody else would, and how God just kind of raised up a bunch of leaders and they became a global network in not that long of a period of time. Well, what happened is that recently Chuck Smith died, and there was no, at least it depends on who you ask. I guess it was probably a similar situation that it didn't seem apparent and clear as to who the successor of Calvary Chapel, at least the lead person, was going to be. So you have many of those early day or prominent pastors within the Calvary Chapel movement that started claiming it as their own, and you have also people in Chuck Smith's family that were claiming it as their own. And so Calvary Chapel's unfortunately experienced kind of a split in more recent times. And that often happens when the transition isn't clear. A lot of churches go through this when it's time for a pastoral change, and there's not somebody within the congregation that God's raised up, and you can't just smoothly hand it over. A lot of churches, they end up calling pastors from like across the country because they, don't have somebody that's, just obvious and apparent as to who it is. And then you have to go through a whole process and get everybody on board and on the same page as to who the person is that's supposed to be the next pastor of the church. Sometimes it's transitions in other areas of life. And the best way that you can make those things easier is to make the transition clear, because if you don't, then it often leads to chaos. 1 Kings 1:24, Nathan said, "Have you, my lord the king, declared that Adonijah shall be king after you, and that he will sit on your throne? Today he has gone down and sacrificed great numbers of cattle, fattened calves, and sheep. He has invited all the king's sons, the commanders of the army, and Abiathar the priest. Right now they are eating and drinking with him and saying, 'Long live King Adonijah.'" Okay, and so the second thing, if you want to make the transition clear, is you have to get rid of the imposters. Okay, and this is the unfortunate thing, when you're talking about a king kind of situation like David is, then getting rid of the imposters often means that you have to either imprison them or you have to kill them. Now, I wouldn't recommend this in our own life. I wouldn't recommend that we go around killing anybody who's, trying to impersonate us or trying to step in and into a position that is not rightfully theirs. But you do have to deal with the problem. Okay, so in Christianity, there's a lot of imposters. There's a lot of people who claim that they are Christian or that their group is Christian, and they take on that name, but they deny most of the central core beliefs and practices, and they practice some very dangerous things. And so one of the things that we have to do as leaders is we have to be able to identify those who are not the real deal. Okay, and so this is unfortunately one of the things that Solomon found himself doing very early on as he took over the throne from David, is he had to spend his time identifying, and David helped with some of this, who are the dangerous people, who are the imposters, who are the threats, who are the people that are going to be a thorn in my side, and I need to identify them early, and I need to deal with them early. And so going through your situation, as you go into a time of transition, identifying what are the threats, what are the threats, what are the counterfeits, what are the obstacles, and being able to remove those as best as you possibly can. 1 Kings 2:2, "I am about to go the way of all the earth," he said. This is David as he is about to die. He says, "So be strong, act like a man, and observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him, keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations as written in the law of Moses. Do this so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go." Now, this is what every godly parent wants for their children. And so we are getting a glimpse into David and his heart as he is going off to be with the Lord, as he is getting ready to pass away. But many of us, when we talk about godly transitions, one of the transitions you have as a parent is the transition of your kid being, a young kid who is completely dependent upon you, and you pretty much have to just show them, teach them, do everything for them. And then they go on to this next stage, which is like where they start wanting independence and they want freedom, they want to make their own decisions, but they're not at the stage where they can make a whole lot of really great ones. And so that balance of being able to give them independence, but a chance to fail where it's safe, and that they're able to fail and it not crush them, right? That's what those teenage years are often for, okay? And then that point in which they become an adult and they move out of the house, they start forming a family of their own, and you have to be able to transition them as best as you can. The best way to do that is to do that with confidence, is to get to a place where you can say, quite honestly, everything I could possibly do to set you up for success, I feel like I've done, and now it's time for me to step back and trust that God's got you, and that is what David is passing on, those last words of advice, that last bit of being able to pass him on and entrust him to God. And just be strong. He's just repeating. You can tell he's repeating all the lessons he's tried to teach him over the years. Be strong, act like a man, observe what the Lord requires, walk in obedience with them, keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations as it's written in the law of Moses. Do this and you will prosper in all you do and wherever you go. These are the lessons. This is the heart of a father passing on to his children. And this is the way that God interacts with us. We've talked about many times throughout this series as we've been talking about how God interacts with us as his children and as a father deals with his son. This is what every godly father wants for his children. 1 Kings 3, verse 1. Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married his daughter. He brought her to the city of David until he finished building his palace in the temple of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. And the people, however, were still sacrificing at the high places because the temple had not yet been built for the name of the Lord. So here we go. And this is exactly, if you go back to the law of Moses in our series through there, you find in the book of Deuteronomy that God specifically told them there's going to come a day in which you're going to have a king. And those kings are not to multiply chariots and horses. They're not to multiply wives. And the reason why they're not to multiply wives is because those wives are going to most likely be from outside, and they're going to take their hearts away to worship after their gods. And so what does Solomon do? It's almost like he has that, list from Deuteronomy as a checklist, and he's like checking it off, like, okay, broke that one, broke that one, broke. What did David, his father, just tell him, for heaven's sakes? So what does he do as soon as David dies? He starts doing the opposite of what God told him to do, what his father told him to do, and he makes an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married his daughter. Okay, so Solomon's mindset, you can tell it's very strategic. He's like, I'm going to build my empire, and I'm going to unite Israel. And the best way to do that is to unite us with all of our, supposed enemies. Find the people who are our allies and build a strong alliance with them. And I'm going to do that through marriage. That's the way that kings and princes and you've seen fairy tales, right? That's how it goes down, right? Kings, princes are supposed to marry princesses, and that's how you build an empire, okay? So that's exactly what Solomon's doing, in spite of the fact that that's exactly what God told him not to. Now, what happens is that exactly what God said was going to happen begins to happen. Solomon wants to make his wife happy, and which becomes many, many wives as we get down into it, okay? He wants to make his wives happy, and these wives come from these other areas who worship other gods, and the best way that he can do that is allowing them to be able to worship the gods that they worship wherever they live. And so the only way you do that is you create Asherah poles, and you create, statues to Baal, and you create other temples to Dagon, and you create all of these other alternate environments, and you become like a, Unitarian Universalist, and you start just like everything goes, and it's all good, and everybody worships the same God, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, and that's exactly the mistake that Solomon made and now he's starting to deal with all of these outside influences. And this is something that a lot of people make, a mistake that a lot of people make when they are making decisions, is they let a lot of influence from the outside come into play. Okay. God is detailed for us. He's outlined for us in his word. These are the rules that you play by. Okay, these are the boundaries in which you live in. This is the way that the world works because I created it and I sustain it and I know how it works. I know what my plan is. I know I have a plan for the end from the beginning, and you are a part of it. And I'm telling you, this is how you best stay in the center of my will. And so to seek that guidance and that wisdom and that influence from the outside is only going to hurt you. Okay. And so that's a mistake that a lot of people, a lot of Christians make, is they put too much stock in wisdom that's coming in from the outside and relationships that come in from the outside. 1 Kings 3:5. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, ask whatever you want me to give you. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? So this is one of the things that Solomon is probably best known for, and what he did absolutely right. Okay, so this is, like, how many of you would want that God comes to you and says, like this, let's just say, like, early on in your Christian life, right? Like, God actually appears to you like a genie in the bottle, right? And says, like, basically that's the scenario it kind of pictures in my mind, right? Solomon, what do you want? Ask for anything, and I'll give it to you. What do you want? And I want you to think about that. If you were in Solomon's shoes right then and there, what is it that you would have been most likely to wish for? And don't say a million wishes, okay? What is it that you, honestly, in your heart, deep down, you want more than anything? And if you had the opportunity, the God of the universe who came to you and he could make any of it happen, anything you said, no matter what it is, he can make it happen. How many of you would ask for what Solomon asked for? He asked for wisdom. He asked for wisdom. And he says, hey, how am I supposed to rule these people if I don't have wisdom? And that gained God's respect. He's like, not only am I going to give you wisdom, Solomon, but because you didn't ask for fame, you didn't ask for money, you didn't ask for power, you didn't ask for, all of these things, I'm going to give you all that too. And so Solomon becomes, and you can read about this, and we're going to get there in Ecclesiastes. Okay, Ecclesiastes is all about Solomon's search for fulfillment and meaning, and he searches in all of these things that God granted him. Okay, so in money and entertainment and in women and all of these things, like God gave him the whole kit and caboodle. He gave him the wisdom he asked for too. Now, how many of you, when I say, like, what would you do if God actually came to you and said, what do you want? Let me, go ahead and ask for it. What would you ask for? How many of you would ask for wisdom? Now, how many of you know that God has said, promised in his word that he will give you wisdom if you ask him for it? How many of you know that? Okay, James 1:5. James 1:5. Go ahead and turn there, check it out, make sure I'm not making this up. God says, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives and doesn't take it back, and he will give it to you liberally. Okay? That's what it says. And how many of you have ever done that before? Okay, when I was a teenager and I was a new Christian, I started reading the Bible. I got to this passage and I read this. And I hadn't even read the passage in James. I read this and I got on my knees and I asked God. I asked him, I said, God, if you are still giving this out, if you are serious about this, I want that kind of wisdom. I want to be able to read my Bible. I want to understand what it means, and I want to be able to do that. I really want that. I want wisdom, Lord. And I believe with all of my heart that he answered that prayer. And, there's a lot of fond memories. As we get into the book of 1 Kings, I'm going to share some of because this book happens to be the very book that I was reading when God started to call me into ministry. Okay, and so this was one of the things that I asked God for, and I really, with all my heart, that was the moment in which I really did understand the Bible. I started understanding the Bible and what I was reading. Have you asked the Lord for wisdom? And so 1 Kings 3:16. Okay, what does wisdom look like? That's a fair enough question, because wisdom is often confused with knowledge, is confused with understanding, it's confused with, a lot of different terms that we kind of read as synonyms, and they're not synonyms. Wisdom is the ability to make godly decisions, okay? Wisdom, and so maybe what I was just describing in the ability to study the Bible and understand it was not quite technically with wisdom, but I do believe he gave me at the very least understanding of his word, okay, which is changed my life forever. Anyway, what does wisdom look like? So here we go. 1 Kings 3:16. Many of you have heard this before, and maybe you didn't know where it came from. Okay, it says, now 2 prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. One of them said, "Pardon me, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house and had a baby, and while she was there with me." And so the baby is born, and he's there, and then she claims, "This woman came and stole it from me. That's not her baby, it's my baby. Whose baby is it? Would you please settle this for us?" Okay, so what does wisdom look like when you're problem solving? And what Solomon does is a classic example, as he gets to the motive and the intent of the heart. And so he says, well, that's easy, cut them in two. And you're, and a lot of people make fun of this and like, what kind of wisdom is that? It was serious wisdom, because what happens is one of the women says that, okay, go ahead, cut them in two. What do I care? And then the other woman says, no, don't cut him in half. Don't harm the kid. She can have it. She can have it. She can have the kid. And the other woman's like, oh, great. Ha, ha, ha. I win. And Solomon goes, no, clearly it's her baby, because she cares about it. She cared that you didn't care that I was going to cut this baby in half. And then she's like, no, spare the baby's life. I don't even care if she's the one who has it. Like, I don't even care about that anymore. I just care about his safety. That's the rightful mom. That was a wise decision. It's thinking outside the box. It's, getting to the intents and the motives, why people do the things that they do, and what's the best case scenario of how to move forward in this. That's what wisdom looks like. And that's why, wisdom is so often personified by the owl, which you see on the screen. Knowledge speaks, but wisdom listens. Okay, and so that's exactly what, Solomon became known as the wisest person who ever lived. And in fact, even in the New Testament, Jesus is the only exception to that. Solomon is known as the wisest person other than Jesus who has ever lived on the face of the earth. Again, have you asked for wisdom to help you in your transitions that you have in life? Okay, and so just a reminder of our process here. Step 1 is those daily assignments in the description down below. Step 2 is these weekly videos where I share my insights and comments. And step 3 is where you put your insights, questions, and comments in the comments down below. And speaking of which, how is God calling you to grow in your life? I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. Let me know. So in godly transitions, how is God calling you to grow? In your communication, in boundaries with other people, in setting an example, in keeping yourself pure, or in seeking wisdom. So let me know, and of course, make sure that you subscribe, hit that like button, share this with other people in your life who want to study the Bible, and until next time, may God's grace be with you.